if Israel cannot commit to a long-standing peace and stop its occupation, then of course the people that are living under that occupation are inevitably going to resist no matter what, unless they actually complete their campaign. This is what they are trying to do in Gaza. This is also what they're trying to do at a slower pace and in a more decentralized fashion. Back to specifically the Israel Palestine equation, because he's like moving in and talking about like Spain and stuff. And I forgot I wanted to mention this, but as Jeremy Scahill, who literally has direct contact with the resistance side's negotiators, who has interviewed them on numerous occasions, reports here that during the Gaza negotiations, Israel understood it would take time to recover all bodies of deceased captives. A specific mechanism for recovering the bodies was agreed. Now Israel is pretending that didn't happen so it can violate the deal and cut the agreed aid shipments in half. So the worst thing that I predicted would potentially happen, that I talked to Jeremy Scahill about, as a matter of fact, in our immediate conversation after the ceasefire, the so-called ceasefire deal, was that Israel would utilize some of the limitations that the resistance forces have in terms of like extracting some of these bodies to say, we're spoiling this deal, we're sullying the deal, and then claim that Hamas is actually sullying the deal. Hell-bent on continuing. Regardless of the international support Trump got for committing them to a ceasefire, I worry that pull another Biden moment and falsely claim Hamas is not abiding. Israel violate peace again. Israel is hell-bent on continuing regardless of the international support Trump got for committing them to a ceasefire. I worry that Trump will pull another Biden and falsely claim Hamas is not abiding by the conditions and let Israel violate peace again, just like January. It was clearly laid out days ago that they will hand over everyone that are alive within 72 hours and people/bodies they cannot give. They will give all information they have on their last whereabouts. Yeah. Bonzer Berry reports that there are actually more footage of the transfer of bodies that are taking place. I think like the total number is now at 8. Following the transfer of only 4 bodies in violation of the agreement, in air quotes, Israel decided to reduce the entry of humanitarian aid to Gaza and prevent the departure of Gazans to Egypt. And the Gazans that are allowed to currently go to Egypt are medevac patients that desperately are in need of additional health care, okay? Health care that they cannot properly get inside of the Gaza Strip. So the able-bodied that are stuck in the Strip as it stands currently are still not allowed to leave anyway. And the only people that are being allowed to leave are the people that are in critical condition. Okay? And Israel is now not even letting them leave the Strip. Mediator to Israel. Hamas is making a great effort to bring back more prisoners who died. More deceased are expected to be transferred tonight in about 3 hours. Israel has informed the UN that 300 aid trucks will be allowed to enter the Gaza Strip starting tomorrow. Fuel and gas will not be allowed in except for specific cases related to humanitarian rehabilitation. This is half of what they agreed to in the negotiations. The mediators are already failing miserably to keep Israel in line, and it's only been a day since the prisoner exchange. Remember, I told you, post-Sunday, once all of the alive prisoners are released, you will then see Israel's true ambitions here. And very likely they will slowly but surely renege on the deal that they said yes to. And it's already slowly but surely happening. We will soon confront these hotspots firmly and will not allow any threats to internal security. We have documented more than 14 Israeli violations of the ceasefire agreement, and we raised them to the mediators in order to put an end to these practices and maintain the ceasefire. This is also the other side of the equation where Israel on the boundaries, because currently Israel still occupies 53% of the Gaza Strip. Okay, they did not do a full, they did not leave the Strip in its entirety. They still maintain control over 53% of the Gaza Strip. Okay, so from the position that they have established, they are still attacking Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Okay, Only 173 aid trucks have entered the sector since the crossings began operating, including 3 cooking gas trucks and 6 solar fuel trucks. This is just a drop in the ocean of needs, while no trucks entered yesterday nor today. Footage of the Red Cross receiving more deceased from Al-Qassam brigades moments ago. This happened an hour ago. Mohammed al-Hindi, the resistance factions did not agree to disarmament and do not accept the threat of forced disarmament. The occupation's attempts to place obstacles to evade the implementation of the agreement were expected. Yes, from what I understand, the aerial strikes have actually stopped, but there are still shootings happening. I think maybe like tank fire as well. There are no international forces on the ground to monitor the ceasefire in Gaza. Netanyahu failed to achieve the illusion of absolute victory, and we will not accept the presence of an international senior representative to govern the sector. The occupation army announces that they have just received 4 additional bodies from the Red Cross. 8 total deceased prisoners have been located and handed to Israel so far. More footage of the transfer of bodies. You can see about a dozen Al-Qassam Brigade's fighters present, mostly just sharing this because the Al-Qassam Brigades haven't been making as many appearances as they did in January. I suspect it's primarily because they recognize how fragile this ceasefire is. Ultimately, Hamas will neither return its weapons nor be defeated by the IDF. In other words, Benjamin Netanyahu will not achieve his stated main goal, which is to completely collapse Hamas. And this is from Ma'ariv. Netanyahu's goal of completely destroying Hamas is unrealistic and has brought Israel to the lowest point in its history, due to setting an impossible goal due to the military's lack of proper preparedness. What they actually fail to consider here, which is what some other Israeli generals have openly mentioned in different points, is that you cannot eradicate an idea because Hamas is a mere representation of the Palestinian resistance. Their interest in surviving, their interest in emancipation. This is something that generals for the past 2 years within the IDF military infrastructure that have openly said time and time again that you just can't your way out of this problem. You just can't your way out of this problem because the reality of the matter is every single person that you has a relative, has a family member. And then when they see their bloodied and family members, they also want to take up arms against the entity that has done this. That's just how it works. Hamas, even if dissolved in its entirety, is going to turn into Hamas 2, if you want to call it that, right? Hamas itself is an evolution from the previous formation of Palestinian resistance. Back in the day, it was the PLO, right? Those are the scary. If Israel cannot commit to a long-standing peace and stop its occupation, then of course the people that are living under that occupation are inevitably going to resist no matter what, unless they actually complete their campaign. This is what they are trying to do in Gaza. This is also what they're trying to do at a slower pace and in a more decentralized fashion in the West Bank. Okay? It was not the military pressure of the IDF that brought Hamas to the current deal, as military commentators and reporters who have become IDF spokespeople in the media try to claim. This is a fantasy of people who are guided by ideology and emotion, not logic. Zamir failed in everything he has said. Hamas was not defeated, and not a single hostage was released through military pressure. The opposite is true. Nearly 70 fighters were in Operation Gideon's Chariots, and many more were injured. Security sources announced full control over militia in Gaza City. Sources told Al Jazeera the security forces have gained complete control over the armed militia in Gaza City and are carrying out a comprehensive sweeping operation. 60 arrests have been made. The security forces reported that a number of individuals accused of executing displaced persons and collaborating with the occupation were during clashes with the militia in Gaza. This is potentially the final day they have before the security situation changes with respect to Israel. Once the prisoners are released, this was 2 days ago from Bonzer Berry. Once the prisoners are released and the 72-hour period ends, the terms become ambiguous and the ceasefire becomes entirely predicated on good faith negotiations and on Trump's word. This is why I kept repeating over and over again that what was important was actually going to come after Monday. Once it's over, once the 72-hour timeline is over, and that Hamas is actually released and the entirety of the resistance forces have released all of the alive captives, okay, that in the aftermath of that, that's when the phase 2 negotiations would take place. Anyway, let's listen to Moin Rabbani discussing the Gaza ceasefire on Al Jazeera. This was yesterday.
Joining us live is from Montreal is Moin Rabbani. He's a non-resident fellow with the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. Moon, thank you so much for joining us. We have to look at the wider picture here. This is just the beginning, perhaps, of a process where we see Israel withdraw. What are you looking at the pitfalls and the bottlenecks in this ceasefire deal?
Well, the first question is whether this is the beginning or the end. Some people have suggested that once Israel retrieves its captives, it will simply resume its genocidal military offensive in the Gaza Strip. Others have suggested that Israel will wait until negotiations collapse over the second stage of the Trump-Netanyahu proposal over issues like governance and disarmament. But looked at more broadly, it's, I think, equally plausible to suggest that this agreement will hold and in some respects will mimic the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon, where the Palestinians cease fire and Israel continues to fire. And at the same time, Israel may be quite content to see negotiations over governance and disarmament and so on collapse, because it could then use these as a pretext to maintain its forces inside the Gaza Strip to prevent reconstruction and so on. So I think what will happen after today is very much up in the air, and it's really unclear what will happen the minute Trump's flight leaves back to Washington.
Ultimately, Moon, though, you look at all this and you realize that it's also going to be contingent on how Mr. Trump's resolve is.
Well, that's the main problem. I mean, we saw already in January that Trump was very determined to get an Israeli-Palestinian agreement, but really the only thing he was interested in was to have a diplomatic achievement on the day of his inauguration. And thereafter, the interest waned, and Israel was able to successfully manipulate the situation and resume and even intensify the Gaza with the full-throated support of Washington. People have suggested that this time it's different because particularly after the Israeli of the Qatari capital, Doha, the Arab leaders realize now that their own sovereignty and national security hangs in the balance, and that they therefore impressed upon Trump the need to seriously address this issue. But again, Washington's attention span is everything in this issue, because the decisions are ultimately going to be made not by Israel, not by the Palestinians, not by the Arab states, but by the United States. And we've seen in the past that when it comes to turf wars, if you will, in Washington, Israel usually comes out on top.
To really also look at Benjamin Netanyahu here, there's a lot of pressure on him. And, you know, of course, Donald Trump, you could argue, has sort of, I suppose, twisted his arm to get this done. And, you know, that's the resolve part of it. But let's face it,
if this is exactly how the January deal unfolded, it's just going to go back to the business as usual, continuing and Trump offering coverage, protective coverage to offering protective coverage to the Israeli side, making it seem as though it's actually Hamas that is violating these deals. And that is the worst possible outcome. I mean, there are multiple outcomes here. Almost all of them are horrible, right? The viceroyship that they place upon the Palestinian population that will be completely manipulated and directed by Israeli interests is bad. As the rest of the world turns a blind eye to the fate of the Palestinians, like that would be horrible, right? But also, the worst possible outcome here is that Israel continues with destruction and simply claims we had to do it because Hamas wouldn't abide by the standards and the conditions set forth in this ceasefire process. Now, there are a lot of other regional actors that are participating in this, which is what makes it less likely that that will be the case. And it seems like Donald Trump has also said that this is going to be a ceasefire. Now, we know that he is very malleable. We know that he is at the mercy of whatever Israel wants. So who knows? Who knows if this will be? Who knows if this will be consistent? Who knows if this will be a long-lasting commitment? Anyway, for the time being,